Montana Territory, 1882. The crackle of the campfire was the only sound that broke the endless silence of the prairie night. Tessa Reynolds sat alone at the edge of the circle of light, her dark brown hair cascading down her back as she stared into the dancing flames. At 24, she had long since resigned herself to spinsterhood, a fact the women of Whitetail Creek never tired of reminding her. No decent man wants a bride who can shoot straighter than him, Mrs. Adler had declared just last week at the general store, or one stubborn enough to run her own homestead. Tessa pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders as the spring night air carried a chill. She had come to believe the whispers were true. The frontier was no place for love, only survival. After losing both parents to the fever 3 years ago, the homestead had become her burden alone. Men proposed occasionally, but Tessa knew they wanted her land more than her company. The frontier had taught her that independence was safer than trust. Better to be alone than betrayed. Tomorrow would bring another day of backbreaking work on the small farm she'd fought to keep. She extinguished the fire with practiced efficiency, looking up at the vast canopy of stars one last time before retiring to her cabin. "You are a Reynolds," she whispered to herself, repeating her father's words. "And Reynolds women stand their ground." But in the darkness of her cabin, the emptiness pressed in around her. The life she had built was sturdy as the walls around her, but hollow as the silence within them. 3 weeks later, dust billowed on the horizon as a small group of riders approached Whitetail Creek. At their lead was Heath Cooper, foreman of the Double Circle Ranch, his 26 years sitting lightly on broad shoulders as he guided his chestnut stallion toward the small Montana settlement. "How long we staying, boss?" called one of the cowhands. "Just long enough to resupply and get news of the cattle markets," Heath answered, his voice carrying the natural authority that had earned him his position despite his youth. His clean-shaven face revealed a strong jaw and eyes the color of prairie skies, though they carried shadows of loss that belied his easy smile. Heath had learned young that attachments were dangerous on the frontier. His family's ranch in Wyoming had been taken in a range war when he was 18, his father killed defending their claim. Since then, he drifted from outfit to outfit, never staying long enough to form connections. The frontier rewarded movement, not roots. His skill with horses and cattle made him valuable. His refusal to form attachments kept him safe. As they rode into town, the usual commotion of cowboys with money in their pockets and time on their hands erupted. Heath left his men to their revelry and headed for the mercantile. He needed supplies and information, not whiskey and cards. The bell above the door jingled as Heath entered Olson's general store. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and catching on something that stopped Heath in his tracks. Rich chestnut hair with golden highlights that cascaded down the back of a woman sorting through seed packets at the counter. "Miss Reynolds, these arrived special from back east," Mr. Olson was saying. "Thought you might want first pick for your garden." "Thank you," she replied, her voice melodic but businesslike. The last batch produced well despite the dry spell. Heath found himself rooted to the spot, watching as she examined the packets with practical efficiency. She wore a simple blue calico dress, practical for work, yet somehow elegant on her slender frame. When she turned, Heath caught sight of striking amber eyes set in a heart-shaped face with delicate features that showed both feminine beauty and frontier determination. "Excuse me," she said politely, finding him blocking her path. Heath stepped aside quickly. "Pardon me, ma'am." Their eyes met briefly, and something passed between them, a flicker of recognition not of the person but of the loneliness each carried. Then she nodded curtly and continued past him. "Who was that?" Heath asked Mr. Olson once the bell had announced her departure. "Tessa Reynolds. Runs her parents' homestead by herself since they passed. Stubborn as they come, that one. Turned down 3 marriage proposals this past year alone." The storekeeper chuckled. "Folks say she'll die an old maid at the rate she's going." Heath found himself at the window, watching as she loaded her supplies into a small wagon. Something about her stirred his curiosity, perhaps the way she carried herself, independent and self-contained, much like himself. He shook his head, pushing the thought away. He had a job to do and a crew to manage. Attachments were liabilities, especially to someone as rooted to the land as she appeared to be. The following day, storm clouds gathered ominously as Tessa hurried to finish reinforcing the chicken coop. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of imminent rain, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw a rider coming fast down the trail to her homestead. She straightened, one hand instinctively moving toward the rifle leaning against the fence post. Strangers rarely meant good news. The rider slowed, and she recognized the cowboy from the general store, the tall one with the startlingly blue eyes who had stared at her like she was some kind of curiosity. "Miss Reynolds," he called, tipping his hat. "Heath Cooper, foreman of Double Circle." He gestured behind him. "Storm's coming in fast. Got separated from my men when lightning spooked the horses. Mind if I waited out here?" The first fat raindrops began to fall as thunder rumbled in the distance. Frontier courtesy dictated hospitality even to strangers, but Tessa hesitated. Men who came alone to isolated homesteads often had motives beyond shelter. "You can use the barn," she offered finally, pointing to the sturdy structure. "There's fresh hay for your horse." Relief crossed his features. "Much obliged, ma'am." No sooner had they reached the barn than the skies opened, rain hammering the roof with percussive fury. Lightning split the darkness, followed by a crash of thunder that made Heath's horse rear in fright. Tessa moved forward instinctively, her hand catching the bridle, her voice low and soothing. "Easy there, boy. Easy." Heath watched in admiration as she calmed his high-strung stallion with a gentle but firm touch. "You have a way with horses. Animals are honest," she replied, leading the stallion to an empty stall. "They don't hide their intentions behind pretty words." He caught the edge in her voice. "Sounds like you've had your fill of pretty words. This is cattle country, Mr. Cooper. Men come through wanting land more than companionship." She began brushing down the horse with practiced strokes. "I prefer honest business to false courtship." Heath leaned against a post, studying her. "And what business brings you to these parts alone, Miss Reynolds?" "I was born here." Her amber eyes met his with directness that was uncommon even on the frontier. "This land has been Reynolds' land for 15 years. I aim to keep it that way." Something in her determination resonated with Heath. He recognized the pride of ownership he'd once felt for his family's ranch before it was taken. "Noble aim," he said, his voice softening. "Not many women would take on such a challenge alone. Not many have a choice." The sharpness in her tone suggested the conversation had ventured into unwelcome territory. The storm intensified, trapping them in the barn as night approached. Tessa lit a lantern and retrieved dried beef and biscuits from a small storage chest. "Not much of a meal," she apologized, offering him a portion. "Better than what I'd have had out in this weather." He accepted gratefully. "Thank you." They ate in silence broken only by the storm's fury. Heath noticed the practiced way she managed everything, the precise movements that spoke of years of self-reliance. It stirred something in him, a recognition of a kindred spirit who had also learned that depending on others was a luxury the frontier rarely afforded. "Your parents' homestead," he said finally. "How long have they been gone?" She stiffened slightly. 3 years. Fever took them both within a week of each other. "I'm sorry." He meant it. "Lost my father in a range dispute. Mother couldn't handle the grief. Passed 6 months later." Tessa's eyes softened slightly. "Yet you chose to stay in cattle country." "It's what I know." He shrugged. "Though I don't stay anywhere long enough to get attached. Double Circle is just my current berth." "A drifter by choice, then?" "Safer that way." Their eyes met across the lantern light, and for a moment, the barriers each had built seemed transparent to the other. "The storm's passing," she said, breaking the moment. "You should be able to make it back to town by morning." Heath nodded, knowing a dismissal when he heard one. Yet something about this woman, her strength, her independence, so similar to his own, intrigued him in a way that unsettled his carefully maintained detachment. The following week found Tessa in an unexpected predicament. The plow horse had gone lame, and planting season wouldn't wait. She stood in Whitetail Creek's only livery stable, negotiating with the owner. $50 is highway robbery, Mr. Sullivan. Supply and demand, Miss Reynolds. Everyone needs horses come planting time. I'll give you 35, and not a penny more." The stable owner shook his head. "I've got 3 other farmers willing to pay full price." "Problem, Miss Reynolds?" Tessa turned to find Heath Cooper leaning against the stable door, hat pushed back on his head. "Nothing that concerns you, Mr. Cooper." He stepped forward anyway. "Sullivan, you still owe the Double Circle for those 3 Mustangs we broke for you last month." The stable owner shifted uncomfortably. Was going to settle that next week. How about you let Miss Reynolds take the bay gelding for 35, and we'll call it even? Sullivan frowned, calculating. Make it 40. 35, Heath said firmly. And the double circle might have some more horses to sell come fall. Fine, Sullivan grumbled. 35 it is. Tessa waited until they were outside before rounding on Heath. I didn't ask for your help. Never said you did. His smile was infuriatingly calm. Just good business. Sullivan's been trying to avoid paying that debt for weeks. She studied him, suspicious of his motives. And what do you want in return? Something flickered in his blue eyes. Surprise, perhaps even hurt. Not everyone has an angle, Miss Reynolds. In my experience, Mr. Cooper, most do. She turned to go, then paused. But thank you all the same. He touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. My pleasure. As she led her new horse away, Tessa couldn't shake the feeling that Heath Cooper had just appended some fundamental truth she'd held about frontier men. The realization was as unsettling as the warmth that spread through her chest when he smiled. The Cooper boy's been asking about you. Mrs. Hargrove informed Tessa as they sorted through fabric at the general store 2 days later. What kind of questions? Tessa kept her voice neutral, though her pulse quickened. About your farm. Whether you manage it all yourself. If you have family nearby. The older woman's eyes twinkled. Seemed mighty interested for a man just passing through. Tessa focused on examining a bolt of sturdy cotton. Mr. Cooper helped me with a business matter. Nothing more. If you say so, dear. Mrs. Hargrove's tone suggested she believed otherwise, though it wouldn't hurt to consider his interest. 24 might not seem old, but out here, opportunities for a respectable match don't last forever. The familiar sting of the comment hit its mark. In frontier towns, women often married by 18. At 24, Tessa had heard the whispers. Too independent, too opinionated, too old for marriage now. She'd convinced herself she preferred it that way. I have no interest in being any man's property, Mrs. Hargrove. The homestead is mine, and I intend to keep it that way. The older woman sighed. Independence is cold comfort on winter nights, Tessa. Just something to consider. Outside the store, Tessa nearly collided with Heath himself, coming up the steps as she was going down. Miss Reynolds. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow, then quickly released her. How's the bay working out? Very well, thank you. She was acutely aware of Mrs. Hargrove watching through the window. He's strong and willing. Glad to hear it. He hesitated. I was wondering if you might need help with your planting. The double circle's work is light right now, and I could spare a day or two. Tessa blinked in surprise. Why would you offer that? Heath shifted, suddenly seeming younger than his 26 years. Just trying to be neighborly. We're not neighbors, Mr. Cooper. You're passing through. Something in his expression changed. Maybe I'm tired of just passing through. The simple statement hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Tessa's carefully constructed defenses tremble. I can manage my own planting, she said finally, more sharply than intended. He nodded, accepting the rebuff with dignity. Of course. Good day, Miss Reynolds. As she watched him walk away, Tessa was struck by the irrational urge to call him back. The sensation was so foreign, so contrary to everything she'd built her life around, that she turned and hurried to her wagon, unsettled by her own reaction. The following morning dawned clear and perfect for planting. Tessa worked steadily through the morning, the new bay gelding proving his worth as they plowed the rich Montana soil. She was marking the next row when hoofbeats approached from the main road. Heath Cooper rode up, leading a second horse laden with supplies. Without dismounting, he called out, "Before you send me packing, this isn't charity. The double circle pays its debts." Tessa straightened, pushing back her bonnet. What debt? You sheltered me during that storm. Out here, that kind of help means something. He gestured to the second horse. Thought you could use some extra seed and supplies. In exchange for your hospitality. She should refuse. Every instinct honed by years of self-reliance told her to send him away. Yet something in his straightforward approach disarmed her usual defenses. I suppose an extra pair of hands wouldn't hurt, she conceded. But just for today. One day turned into two as they worked side by side, planting Tessa's fields with an efficiency she couldn't have managed alone. Heath proved himself knowledgeable and hard-working, respecting her direction on her land without question. As they paused for water on the second afternoon, he asked, "Why a homestead? Most women in your position would have sold after your parents passed." Tessa considered the question, finding herself willing to answer honestly. This land is part of me. My father staked this claim when I was 9. I watched my parents pour their lives into making it flourish. She gazed across the fields. Selling would dishonor everything they built, everything they taught me. Heath nodded, understanding in his eyes. My father felt the same about our ranch. He used to say land gives you roots, and roots give you strength. What happened to your family's ranch? She asked, realizing she'd never heard. A shadow passed over his face. Cattle Baron wanted our water rights. When my father refused to sell, men came one night. They burned our barn, shot our cattle. He paused. My father confronted them. They shot him too. Tessa's heart constricted. And the law did nothing. The law was in the Baron's pocket. His voice held old bitterness. We couldn't fight it. Mother never recovered from losing him, wasted away. After she passed, I drifted. Figured if I never stayed in one place, I'd never lose anything again. The simple, painful truth of his strategy resonated with Tessa's own. Wasn't that why she kept everyone at a distance? To prevent the devastation of loss she'd felt when her parents died? I'm sorry about your family, she said softly. And I'm sorry about yours. His blue eyes held hers. But you've honored them by keeping this place alive. That takes courage. Coming from him, the words felt like truth rather than flattery. They worked until dusk, a comfortable silence between them broken only by necessary conversation. As Heath prepared to leave, Tessa found herself reluctant to see him go. You could come by tomorrow, she offered hesitantly. If you're still willing. There's the north field yet to plant. His smile revealed genuine pleasure. I'd like that. Over the next 2 weeks, Heath returned whenever his duties at Double Circle allowed. They fell into an easy rhythm, working together during the day, sharing simple meals as the sun set. Tessa found herself looking forward to his visits, his quiet competence and lack of presumption gradually wearing down her wariness. One evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Heath asked, "Why have you never married? If you don't mind my asking." Tessa tensed, then relaxed, realizing the question held no judgment. The men who've asked wanted my land, not me. Or they expected me to give up everything my parents built and become a proper wife somewhere else. She shrugged. I decided I'd rather be alone than surrender my independence. Heath nodded thoughtfully. Makes sense. Though seems to me the right partner wouldn't ask you to surrender anything. The right partner is rare on the frontier, she replied. Besides, according to town gossip, I'm practically an old maid at 24. Most men want younger wives. Heath's laugh startled her. 24 is old? Then at 26, I must have one foot in the grave. His amusement was contagious, and Tessa found herself smiling. Mrs. Hargrove told me just last week that opportunities for a respectable match don't last forever. And what did you tell her? That I prefer my independence to being someone's property. Heath's expression grew serious. Marriage doesn't have to mean becoming property. My parents were partners in everything. Father always said mother was the smartest decision he ever made. The wistfulness in his voice revealed the depth of what he'd lost. Tessa realized with sudden clarity that they shared the same wound. Parents whose love had shown them what was possible, followed by a loss that made them afraid to reach for it themselves. Why haven't you settled somewhere? She asked. Started your own ranch. Never found a place worth the risk. He met her eyes. Until recently. The implication hung in the air between them, neither willing to acknowledge it directly. It's getting late, Tessa said finally, rising from her chair. Thank you for your help today. Heath stood, hat in hand. My pleasure, Miss Reynolds. As he mounted his horse, she called, Tessa. My friends call me Tessa. His smile in the fading light made her heart flutter in a way she'd never experienced. Good night, Tessa. I'll see you tomorrow. Long after his figure had disappeared down the road, Tessa remained on the porch, unsettled by the realization that for the first time in years, the homestead felt lonely when he left. Word spread quickly in Whitetail Creek that the Double Circle's young foreman was spending considerable time at the Reynolds homestead. Whispers and speculation followed Tessa as she made her weekly trip to town for supplies. Heard Cooper's been calling regular at your place, Mr. Olson commented as he weighed out flour for her order. Mr. Cooper has been kind enough to help with some of the heavier work, Tessa replied evenly. Kind indeed, Mrs. Adler interjected from nearby. Though a man like that doesn't spend time on charity unless he's getting something in return. The insinuation stung. There's nothing improper about our arrangement, Mrs. Adler. Of course not, dear. The woman's smile was condescending. Though you might want to consider your reputation. A single woman entertaining a man alone. Well, people do talk. Anger flared in Tessa's chest. People always talk, Mrs. Adler. Fortunately, their opinions matter very little to me. She completed her purchases with rigid dignity and left the store, only to find several cowboys from the double circle lounging outside. Their conversation halted abruptly at her appearance, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Afternoon, Miss Reynolds, one called. Boss around today? Mr. Cooper is attending to his duties, I imagine, she replied coldly. Another cowboy snickered. Some duties more pleasant than others, I reckon. Humiliation burned through Tessa as laughter rippled among the men. She loaded her supplies with trembling hands, furious at how quickly her hard-earned respect in the community could be undermined by association with a man. When Heath arrived at the homestead later that day, Tessa met him in the yard, her resolve hardened. I think it's best if you don't come here anymore, Mr. Cooper. He dismounted slowly, confusion evident in his expression. Did I do something wrong? Your visits are causing talk in town. Talk that damages my reputation and undermines everything I've worked for. She kept her voice steady through sheer will. I can't afford to be the subject of gossip. Understanding dawned on his face. Someone said something to you in town. Several someones, including your own men. Anger flashed in Heath's eyes. I'll speak to them. That won't help. The damage is done. Tessa straightened her shoulders. I've spent 3 years proving I can manage this homestead alone, that I don't need a man's help or protection. Your presence here contradicts everything I've fought to establish. This isn't about help or protection anymore, Tessa. Heath stepped closer. You know that as well as I do. The truth of his words terrified her. Something had grown between them, something that threatened the careful independence she'd built her life around. Whatever it is, it can't continue, she insisted. I won't risk everything I've built for, she faltered. For what? Heath pressed. For feelings? For companionship? For a future that might include someone beside you? For something that will inevitably end when you move on to your next job? She finished, the words cutting her as deeply as she meant them to wound him. You're a drifter, Mr. Cooper. That's what you do. You don't put down roots. The hurt in his eyes was unmistakable, but he nodded slowly. If that's how you want it. It is. He mounted his horse without another word, his rigid posture revealing the effort it cost him. As he rode away, Tessa told herself she'd done the only sensible thing. The emptiness that swept through her was merely the price of maintaining her independence. That night, alone in the cabin that had never seemed so quiet, she repeated the mantra that had sustained her for years. The frontier is no place for love. Only survival matters. For the first time, the words rang hollow. 2 weeks passed with no sign of Heath. Tessa threw herself into work, rising before dawn and laboring until exhaustion forced her to rest. The north field that they had planted together began to show tender green shoots, a visible reminder of what she'd sent away. On her next trip to town, whispers followed her again, but with a different tone. Heard Cooper's leaving double circle. Mrs. Hargrove informed her as they passed on the boardwalk. Taking a job with some outfit up near Helena. The news shouldn't have affected her, yet Tessa felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. When? She managed to ask. End of the week, from what I hear. Shame, really. He was well liked. The older woman studied Tessa's face with sudden insight. Thought you might have known, seeing as you two were friendly. We were acquaintances only. Tessa replied mechanically. She completed her errands in a fog, the knowledge that Heath was leaving the area altogether creating a hollowness she couldn't explain. He was doing exactly what she'd predicted, moving on. She should feel vindicated, not devastated. As she loaded her wagon for the return journey, a commotion erupted from the saloon down the street. Men spilled onto the boardwalk, forming a circle around what appeared to be a fight. Above the general shouting, Tessa heard a familiar name. She secured her horse and moved closer, anxiety building. Through gaps in the crowd, she caught glimpses of Heath squaring off against a much larger man. One of the local troublemakers known for picking fights with outsiders. Say it again, Cowboy, the brute challenged, fists raised. Heath's voice carried clearly. I said you owe Miss Reynolds an apology for the filth you've been spreading about her. Tessa froze, realization dawning. Heath was defending her honor, likely against the very rumors his visits had helped create. The larger man laughed. Ain't spreading nothing that ain't true. Everyone knows you've been warming her bed since you hit town. Heath's fist connected with the man's jaw with enough force to send him staggering. That's a lie. The man recovered quickly, charging Heath with the advantage of weight and reach. They exchanged blows, Heath's quicker reflexes allowing him to dodge the worst of the attack, but a heavy punch caught him in the ribs, doubling him over. Stop! Tessa pushed through the crowd. That's enough. Her appearance momentarily halted the fight. Heath straightened, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. Tessa, stay back. This isn't your fight, she told him firmly before turning to the larger man. And you, Mr. Byers, should be ashamed. Spreading lies about a woman who's never done you any harm. Byers sneered. Defending your fancy man, Miss Reynolds? Mr. Cooper is an honorable man who helped a neighbor in need, Tessa replied, her voice carrying to the entire crowd. Which is more than I can say for most of you, who were happy to let a woman struggle alone rather than offer honest assistance. She turned to Heath. Come with me. You need that cut tended. The authority in her voice brooked no argument. Heath followed her to her wagon, ignoring the murmurs from the crowd. You shouldn't have done that, she said as they moved away from the onlookers. Someone needed to stand up to him. The things he was saying, Heath's jaw tightened. I couldn't let it pass. So I gathered. She examined the cut on his brow. This needs cleaning. My supplies are at home. He hesitated. I thought you didn't want me at your homestead. Their eyes met, and Tessa saw the hurt still lingering beneath his concern. I think we're past worrying about appearances now, don't you? Back at the homestead, Tessa cleaned Heath's wounds with gentle efficiency, trying to ignore the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers and the way his nearness affected her composure. I heard you're leaving, she said finally, applying salve to the cut above his eye. News travels fast, he replied, wincing slightly. Double circles cutting back. Owner's son is taking over as foreman. And you're going to Helena. He nodded. Got an offer from the Rocking J. Good outfit, from what I hear. Tessa stepped back, putting distance between them. So you're still drifting. Something shifted in Heath's expression. Is that what you want me to do? Keep drifting. The direct question stripped away pretense. Tessa looked away, unable to meet his gaze. What I want doesn't matter. It's who you are. Is it? Heath stood, closing the distance she'd created. Or is it who I've been because I was afraid to be anything else? His honesty demanded equal courage from her. What are you saying? I'm saying I've been running for 8 years. Afraid to put down roots because I lost everything once. He took her hand carefully. Then I met a woman who lost everything too. But instead of running, she dug in deeper. Built something lasting. Tessa's heart hammered against her ribs. Heath, I love you, Tessa. The simple declaration hung in the air between them. I love your strength, your determination. The way you fight for what matters to you. Tears threatened, emotions she'd suppressed for years rising to the surface. You don't understand. I can't. I can't risk losing everything again. That's exactly what I understand. His blue eyes held hers. We're the same, you and I. Both thinking if we don't let anyone close, we can't get hurt again. And we're right, she whispered. Are we? His hand gently cradled her cheek. Because all I've learned from staying away from you these past weeks is that being alone doesn't protect you from pain. It just guarantees it. The truth of his words resonated deep within her. Wasn't that what she'd been feeling? The emptiness of the homestead. The hollow victory of maintaining her independence at the cost of connection? I'm 24, she said weakly. People already say I'm too old for marriage. Heath's laugh was gentle. Age is just a number, Tessa. It's what's in here. He touched her heart. That matters. And what I see there is a woman young enough to have decades of life ahead, but wise enough to know her own mind. His words broke something loose inside her. A fear she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it wasn't part of her. With a small sound that was half laugh, half sob, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as years of loneliness dissolved in the simple human connection they'd both denied themselves for too long. When they finally parted, Tessa saw her own wonder reflected in Heath's eyes. Stay, she whispered. Not as my helper or protector, as my partner. He smiled, the joy transforming his face. I was hoping you'd say that. News of their engagement spread through Whitetail Creek faster than wildfire. To Tessa's surprise, the reaction was largely positive. Respect for her independence transformed into admiration for the partnership she and Heath were building. They were married in late summer, a simple ceremony in the town church followed by a celebration at the homestead. As the sun set on their wedding day, Heath led Tessa away from their well-wishers to the porch of what was now their home. "Happy, Mrs. Cooper?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she admitted, leaning into his embrace. "Though I never expected to be anyone's wife. And I never expected to be anyone's husband." He kissed her temple. "Seems we were both wrong about what the frontier had in store for us." Looking out over the land that had once represented only her determination to survive alone, Tessa saw it transformed, not diminished by sharing, but expanded by the possibilities their partnership created. "What do you think about expanding the North Field next spring?" Heath asked. "Maybe add some cattle on the west section?" The casual way he spoke of their future, years stretching ahead together, filled Tessa with quiet joy. "I think we can build something remarkable here." "We already have," he murmured, turning her to face him. "Something neither of us could have built alone." As their lips met in the gathering dusk, Tessa knew they had both found what the frontier truly offered. Not just the challenge of survival, but the possibility of thriving together in a partnership built on equal strength and shared dreams. The homestead that had once felt hollow in its silence now hummed with purpose, not just as a defiant stand against loss, but as the foundation for a future neither of them had dared to imagine before finding each other. The whispers in town eventually found new subjects, but the story of Heath and Tessa Cooper became something of a legend in Whitetail Creek. How a drifter found roots, how an independent woman found partnership without sacrifice, and how two people who believed love had no place on the frontier discovered it was the only thing that made the hardship worthwhile.